It's almost time for that beer, right? I'll make a quick introduction on myself. I think I recognize a lot of faces in the audience. I think most of you know who I am, so I'll keep it really brief. My name is Shum Singh. I'm the founder and MD at Agnitio Capital. We're a fully regulated and authorized investment bank here in London. My partner, David Bloom, runs our office out of Seattle. We are principally focused on mergers and acquisitions. We've sold a variety of studios over the year to a number of some of the largest players, publishers worldwide. In fact, some of the more recent transactions we've done, 3 in fact, we've had the privilege of working with Jorgen, and yeah, it's a good segue into introducing yourself, Jorgen, please.
Thank you, Shum. So I'm the founder and the CEO of Stillfront Group. So we have a vision that we should create a really significant gaming group, being really successful by doing a particular thing. We would like to find the best independent studios and create a group where you really can draw the benefits from being a larger player, but still keeping the entrepreneurs that are so strong, I think, in creating a company. So my background, this is the 4th company I've been founding, so I've made a lot of the errors of being an entrepreneur, but also found some findings, I think.
Great. And I think what would be really helpful for the audience is obviously some background on Stillfront. I mean, you guys only recently listed, and you came out of nowhere and made some pretty phenomenal transactions. So that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so we are today 11 studios. We are from significant studios, so Good Game Studios is part of Stillfront Group today, so that was obviously a significant transaction. So we acquired Good Game Studios for 270 million euros, 1.5 years or just over a year ago. But also we have niche studios that focus on the typical types of products or category of products. But the common denominator is that we have games that live for a long time. So our oldest game is from Simmertronics in the US, in St. Louis. Their game is over 30 years old. So we have been shown that we can really create from successful games, even small up to very large ones, we can increase their performance by joining forces in our group. So I think that our model works, both for small studios joining into us and also significant studios like Good Game.
Well, that's really interesting. What I'd like to know more, I think a lot of the people probably in the audience want to know, how do you do that? How do you extend the longevity of those games and once they're, I guess, part of Stillfront Group?
We look for companies that are successful, that runs with good profitability and with an experienced team. So we're not going into trying to figure out distress situation or something like that. But what we do, and we're very particular about that, we spend some serious time with the founders and the management to figure out whether we think truly we can accelerate their business. That could be either by adding user acquisition knowledge and experience, and just the amount of data we have to see whether a game could perform better or not is massive. So we have approximately 500 million registered users, and we have spent some $250 million in user acquisition throughout the years. So we have a lot of data. So we can identify if we think we can scale up the business, if we think that live ops could be improved because we have a lot of experience, if we think we can take a product that is successful in one region because we are truly international, to take it into the Middle East, for instance, where we are super strong, or to another market in Europe where we're also strong, or to the US. Then we can also create something which could accelerate that business. So we've seen through the years that we have been able to accelerate the 10 studios out of the 1,200 we have looked into. The 10 studios that we have invested in all have accelerated post joining the group of ours.
Okay. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit. In the 3rd quarter, Q3, which you've obviously announced at earnings report, you stated that 57% of the revenues that you generated came from mobile games. Is that really more of a focus, or is PC as well, or browser? I mean, it'd be interesting to know.
We focus on creating good content and good gaming experiences. So then we adjust and go cross-platform. So we're platform agnostic in that way because we focus on really bringing that entertainment on the channel that the consumers really would prefer. So now it's the consumer's behavior because we're completely data-driven, so we're measuring everything, and they do prefer to consume our products primarily on mobile, and that's increasing significantly. But if it's something else in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, then we adopt because the focus is in the content of our products and the joy the consumers have of consuming them, rather than saying that we will go mobile or not mobile or so. Having said that, I must say that we're extremely happy with the improved able to achieve going through cross-platform. So we have transformed several of our games to HTML5, and they are accessible both through PC browser as well as or any browser, as well as native mobile and progressive web apps. And that has really made those products double in revenues in 12 months.
So is that kind of a firm part of your strategy? Is it kind of, it's obviously not mobile first, but it's maybe cross-platform or platform agnostic first, try to obviously just distribute to as many platforms as possible?
Yes, you can say that it's platform agnostic first.
Right.
In that sense, we focus on the content and focus on the live ops. So we have products that have migrated from one platform to the other, still keeping the players. I think that's a very strong sign that the important thing is the content and the live ops, and it's a joy to consume our products rather than using a certain platform.
Right. You also reported in Q3 that you grew revenues by 25%. What was driving that? I mean, what is ultimately your growth strategy? I mean, obviously you just mentioned, you're kind of platform agnostic, but do you see sort of more opportunity in mobile, in browser, in sort of all areas? I mean, what's driving that, I guess?
We're completely data-driven. So we go out and do test panels in different territories on all our 32 products. So the ones that shows the traction needed for putting in money, and we're quite EBIT oriented, so we only conduct marketing, performance marketing or user acquisition if we can get the money back in 180 days net. So whether we can do that on browser or on PC or in that territory and that territory, that is what drives and defines our growth. I think we're good and strong in user acquisition, so we have been proving that we can scale up existing products, and that is exactly what we look for. Very often when you're an entrepreneur, you've built a nice performing company, but you have assets that are not exploited to the full. So, and that's often the case when it comes to marketing, so we can scale that up.
Just kind of changing gears, because I'm sure obviously a lot of people in the audience would be interested in this, is, I mean, you've obviously made 11 studios, you mentioned that, you're continuing to be acquisitive, but what are you actually looking for in terms of a potential acquisition candidate?
If someone has built their company, and I really, in every way, put my respects to that company, and at some point, if you would like to sell, that's all good, and step down. That's all good, but we're not the investor or the acquirer. If you're still are hungry to build your company to the next level, but it's tricky to take it from 50 people to 200 people. That's a tricky step with a lot of pitfalls, and you have to put another risk into it. So what we would like to if someone is really hungry, you're a business builder, you still think you can do it, but there is another amount of capital that is needed. It's more knowledge that you need to take into it. You need comparison data, whatever it could be, that is lacking, or knowledge of a new market to enter. Then we can add that. If we can define such a growth agenda, and we believe in the individuals because we are super decentralized, then it's the right target for us to start to discuss with. Then obviously there's a lot of things that you should agree upon before making a transaction, but that is the right prerequisites for starting a more intense discussion. Okay,
so given that, and you've obviously done it now 10, 11 times, what's the kind of success rate? Because obviously in M&A, a lot of transactions don't end up succeeding. A lot of the synergies or a lot of the plans that you initially sort of hypothesize don't actually materialize. How has the post-transaction performance been of a lot of the studios?
So with the model we have been lucky to actually all the, as I mentioned briefly, all of our acquisitions have performed better after transaction compared to prior to the transaction. So far, all companies that has joined into Stillfront Group has accelerated. And I think the reason for that, it might be luck, but it also might have to do with the model that we have. So we are super decentralized, so we're not making this hard kind of integration where now we have a corporate way of doing this, we have another corporate way of doing that, you have to adopt to certain policies. That's not us. Keep the way that you operate in because you're a good company, you're a good business builder. But we could add things. We could add some UA acceleration. We could add some capital if that's a limiting factor. We can take away some hinders. And that has proven to be a very, if not bulletproof, at least a better risk-reward balance. So I think that's the reason why we so far haven't been exposed for any case of negative post-transaction development.
Right. So given that, I guess that a lot of the targets tend to be then smaller, right? Because there might be lacking a particular functional area of expertise, such as maybe UA, such as maybe live ops, or other areas. How do you see that? Because obviously Stillfront has grown tremendously, but how do you see that evolving over time? Because now you're obviously going to be competing with larger publishers for acquiring larger studios.
I think it will be a tremendous consolidation the next coming 3, 4, 5 years. So I think that it's crucial not to be stuck in the middle. You need to have the access to muscles in terms of financials and capital, etc. So I think that what will happen is that it's very few companies between, say, 5 million in revenues up to 50 actually. That will be quite a few companies in 3, 4, 5 years' time. What we have done is that we have now established a dual track practice when it comes to M&A. So we continue to look for companies that are smaller in the way that you mentioned, typically then from 5 to 15, 20 million, 15 to million in revenues. But we also have a separate track because there are a number of companies between then 15 up to 50 or even 100 million in revenues.
Sure.
And there are still independent companies out there which we can add value to. So we have some interesting discussions ongoing, but we'll see what the future will bring.
I think that's most of my questions. So I think do we have a few minutes, Ella? Or?
Yeah.
So if anybody has any questions.
As the industry matures, how do you believe that the importance of consolidation like this is going to be towards small and independent companies remaining competitive or becoming competitive?
Yeah, I think that it will come and go, consolidation. As new technologies come, obviously that opens for new companies to come from nowhere. But I think that if you look back for a certain time when I started in gaming in quite some time ago, 20 years ago, of course it was a large publishers, but then the digital distribution, everything came and it exploded the companies. I think that consolidation will take place for quite some more time, so it will be quite tough for a small company to be super successful. Some will be successful, being small companies, very niched, very focused, also in 3, 4, 5 years' time. But on average, few companies. What is needed then is a technology shift, or that you have something very, very unique. Of course, that will always happen. But on average, it will be less companies of that size. I'm absolutely convinced that that will be the situation. And it will be tougher to compete with user acquisitions or technology development, etc. So I think that for several reasons that will be the case.
I mean, I would just add to that, look at the top 500 grossing. A few years ago, maybe the top 200 grossing was dominated by large players. It's probably the top 500 grossing now. So every trend that you see only forecasts a more dominant position, even though the industry in absolute terms continues to grow, that growth is going to be comprised more or could be attributed more to larger players who are going to take a bigger slice of that growth. But to Jorgen's point, and I concur, there's definitely space for those niche or really nimble, fast-moving, smaller to mid-sized players that understand their audience, can continue to be loyal, and provide enough content to their end user communities.
I think also it will be more difficult to take a company from the 5 million to the 50 million in a couple of years. Still, if you focus on your niche, you could be profitable and take care of your consumers in a good way, but it will be even more difficult to take that leap in the future. So that's why we're creating our group, because if we are 20 studios taking that leap, we can help each other and just increase the risk reward, improve the risk reward.
Yeah, so...
Hi, Dave.
Hi. You talked about investing in companies, and I was wondering, when you look at adding capital to an acquisition, is it strictly done from a financial standpoint, or is there your sort of gut feel for what the company is doing and how well you think it's doing?
That's a good question. We are exceptional data-driven company. So typically we agree upon a framework, which is typically the budget, that the business plan that a studio has when they come into our group. Where things happen, you might publish or come up with a new product that shows tremendous strong data. Then formally it works the following, that the studio head comes to me with an investment ask. And that happened, for instance, for Bubble Games that had their super success, Need a Harb, published just 1 year ago. Others were just tremendous, but they didn't have any more money on the bank account. So they came and say, this is the data. I would like $1 million to accelerate the business. And then we look at the data. So it's quite simple from that perspective. If the data suggests that you can meet the scaling up, in this case for UA, then we grant that request. So, and of course, in some cases it could be more difficult. It's not black or white, but then it's a judgment call. So, but I strongly believe we invested in the individuals because they have proven a track record of building businesses. So usually it's a quite straightforward discussion, even though that the answer could be hard to see. But we figure out a way to do it in different steps and measure and try to expand it further all the way. So far we've figured it out quite nicely, I think.